Sensing is believing 2.0. Ambra sensed a strong pair of arms around her, though she could not see anyone. Oh, God. The re-entry sensation was like being jolted out of a nightmare, mixed up with jet lag and being on a stomach-churning carnival ride all at once. A wave of nausea hit her, and she fought to stop herself from retching. "Impressive," said Mortlock as she emerged from MAGE, leaning on her father. "I know how sick it can make you feel when you come back. You should have seen the mess after." He stopped mid-sentence as Lightstone shot him a look. Ambra sat down on one of the control room chairs for a few minutes, alternatively sipping water and taking deep breaths until she had recovered. "So, what did you think?" asked Mortlock. "Jesus Christ! What the hell was that? Are you kidding me?" snapped Ambra at her father. "Why would you put me through that?" "That is a world that has hit 4 degrees warming and burnt through its remaining accessible fossil fuel reserves," said Lightstone, without a hint of surprise at his daughter's reaction. "Everything else you see, species loss, collapse of food supplies, displacement, conflict and violence, outbreaks of disease and flooding, are all a result of that," said Mortlock. Ambra's face crumpled. "Well, it's dreadful. It's just awful. Beyond words. Especially when I saw my—" She gulped, unable to share the encounter with Lewis. "If only everyone could feel that, they would— the future would be different, right?" Lightstone placed his hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Who wants to live in a world without giraffes?" whispered Ambra, almost to herself. They lapsed into silence, punctuated by Goyder tapping numbers on an old-style calculator. Ambra looked up at Mortlock. "You said MAGE can be programmed to test different scenarios," she said. "Yep, we can test what happens given all kinds of variables, different system conditions," said Mortlock. "We have access to huge amounts of data from various United Nations agencies like the Food and Agricultural Organization, World Health Organization, also the International Energy Agency, you name it, thousands of data sets." Ambra looked at him, then her father. "Then I need to know what it feels like when it works out," she said. "What do you mean?" asked her father. "When we work it out. Not when we fail. What's the world like if we sort it out?" Lightstone scratched his head. "Huh. We didn't think of that. Of course, we should also run that scenario, in fact, several variations." "Yes," exclaimed Mortlock. "People have to have something they want to move to, not just get away from." Lightstone was already hammering away at keyboards and screens, tweaking the system conditions and muttering to himself. Less than 2 degrees, reduction in material throughput, all people in upper left quadrant of UN Human Development Index and ecological footprint overlay graph, permafrost stays intact, 50% of all ecosystems set aside for other species, rapid transition to renewable energy, increased food production in cities, end extreme inequality, adjust economic assumptions to fit within biological limits. Once he was satisfied, he waved to Ambra, who stepped back into the MAGE simulator, Mortlock closing the door behind her. The rumble under her feet, the flash of blue Saturnian light. Again, she was far above Earth, with an astronaut's view. This time, Ambra could see that, though there were some minor differences, the shape and colour of the world looked mostly as it should. The polar caps intact, the green belts of the tropics and temperate zones ringing the globe. The rivers flowed. Crops flourished. Animals and birds were thriving. Closer she flew. A brilliant blue sky. Every building in every city on every continent was a power station. Solar arrays dotting the urban landscape, fields of wind turbines beyond the cities, a sea of blades slowly rotating. She could see that the rooftops were green, that all kinds of produce was being grown in urban farms right in the city. There were even beehives on rooftops for the precious pollinators of much of the food supply. She was on the ground. Here, Ambra felt something more than the physical world had changed, though she couldn't put her finger on exactly what. Life on Earth was still no utopia, but she sensed that people seemed less frenetic and more connected to each other. There was no pervading air of fear or apprehension, no overwhelming milieu of conflict or crime, and no pandemics. She was in the city. The air was clean, birds warbled, and the streets were alive with people who were walking or on bikes or cargo bikes, no longer forced inside by dangerous, noisy vehicles. Rapid transit moved people safely and effectively within and beyond the city. "Mum?" came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see a very different Lewis Lightstone. He looked healthy and well-nourished, the faint freckles across his nose almost disappearing into his sun-kissed skin. He was rolling up the sleeves of his checked shirt and kicking dirt from his boots. Lewis laughed, tipping the wide-brimmed hat off and running his hand through his tousled hair. "Ha! Why'd you look so surprised, Mum? You know all the cool kids are into urban ag and city farms. Well, that, or they're off engineering distributed renewable energy systems." He jerked his head in the direction of a teenage girl who was approaching. "How'd it go?" asked Lewis, addressing the girl. "Hey! Hi, Mum. Yeah, the city's pretty pleased. Let's just say the next time anyone wants a citizen-powered energy trading system, they'll call Jess Lightstone, founder of Lightwork Energy," she beamed, waving a signed contract in the air. "Good one, sis. Congrats, that's a huge win. And it goes without saying that I'll sign the farm up as your first customer." Ambra stared at her daughter, a mirror image of herself at the same age. "Here, try one of my strawberries." Lewis dipped his hand into a bag he wore across his body and held out a handful of bright red fruit. "You'll be impressed. Dad reckons they're even better than my avocados." Ambra's face creased into a smile, her heart overflowing. He was only a teenager, but already her son was a farmer, a 21st century farmer, using time-honoured techniques as well as modern technology to turn soil, seed, sun and water into food, right in the heart of the city. Her daughter, barely out of her teens, was running a cooperative, an employee-owned and governed enterprise that literally put the power of energy generation and trading into people's hands. Ambra's eyes filled with tears of love and pride. She had so many questions for her Lewis and Jess, but before she could ask, a feeling of disassociation gripped her once again, a pair of arms around her. She broke the surface of the illusion, her father catching her as her knees buckled. Another wave of nausea, but her heart was singing. Her father led her out of the simulator and gave her a drink of water. "And?" asked Lightstone after Ambra had had a couple of minutes to recover. "What's it like?" Ambra smiled through tears of relief. "It's hard to describe in words." She wiped her eyes. But before she could say any more, she hit a wall. The experience in MAGE had been emotionally and physically exhausting, even though it had been created entirely by virtual sensations. Her eyes were heavy. "Do you see what I experience in there?" she asked. "Yes. Well, we design some of it, and your conscious and subconscious mind does the rest," said Mortlock. "How do you know my future self has a son and a daughter?" "We don't," said her father. "There are too many variables, not the least of which is your free will and choices." "So, Lewis and Jess aren't real?" Ambra's face fell. Lightstone did not answer but stroked his daughter's forehead. "Ambra, MAGE is an incredible experience, but it does take a significant toll on your body as well as having a psychological impact. And you've already been through quite an ordeal to arrive here. Go and get some sleep. We'll talk more in the morning."